don't move too far. My name is Todd Bruns. I'm the Institutional Repository Librarian at Eastern Illinois University. I'm joined today with my colleague, Stacy Knight Davis. She is our Head of Library Technologies. And our presentation is It Takes the Library. It's all focused on content recruitment and how we've gotten various types of content in our repository and how we've been involving our library staff in this process. So let's move to the next slide. Go through what our agenda is going to be in this presentation, moving from at the top from the left to the right. I'll give you a little bit of background about our institution and our repository. Then we'll move into what we call the first wave of adding content to our repository. That's going to be the bulk of the presentation, is how did we get a lot of content in very quickly. So there'll be about 4 slides on that and 4 different areas that we pulled content from. And I really want to give you some sense of what we were doing with that. To provide some context to this, is there anyone here who does not have an institutional repository at their institution? A couple of you, okay. Hopefully, if you are going to get one eventually, this will give you some ideas. Those of you who do have IRs, how many of you have digital commons? Okay, about a third of you maybe, okay. So part of what I'm going to be talking about today has to do with that platform. So in some cases, I'll be referring to things that come with that platform, and we'll try to explain that somewhat. The second wave is moving into new content types after we got the initial population in. And the third wave is some of the future directions that we think we're going to be going in with content. The fourth thing that I'll talk about is faculty recruitment. As we're talking about different types of content that we're adding, just kind of assume that throughout these 3 waves, we've been adding faculty content little by little. That 4th section will be when we talk about all the different things that we try to do to recruit faculty. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Okay, so a little bit of background. Eastern Illinois University, it's a research level 3 institution. We currently have about 9,000 students. We normally, historically, have right around 11,000. And we don't offer PhD programs, we just offer masters. And we're currently at 9,000 because of basically the Great Recession. There's currently a teacher crisis in our state of Illinois where basically a lot of people just don't want to go into teaching anymore. Eastern started out as a normal school, which means we were a university to teach teachers. We still have a legacy of that. That's partially why we're down some 2,000 students. So as I'm talking about content recruitment, partially what you'll hear me talk about through some of this is cutbacks, because that's something that we've been dealing with at our campus. Perhaps you have been dealing with at your campus as well. This is our repository. It's a screenshot of it. It's called The Keep. It is built on the Digital Commons platform. I came on board with Eastern in November of 2010. I was a repurposed position. What they did was they took the circulation librarian position, and the Dean of Library Services wanted to start a repository. So he made it an institutional repository librarian. And when I came on board, we started talking about, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to do open source? Are we going to do a vendor platform? We opted to do a vendor platform because we didn't basically want to be wrapped up with doing constant technical support. We really wanted to focus on content recruitment. So we ended up going with Digital Commons. We called it The Keep, and that was basically just a name that we came up with. We wanted something that had a little bit of flavor to it. And it kind of, that little picture there, it represents our main building on our campus, which is called Old Main, which it looks like a castle. Eastern, if you can think about it, is sort of a castle in a cornfield, essentially. We are in East Central Illinois. It's a very rural area. So The Keep seemed to kind of fit with that, and also fits with the repository of like keeping content. So it's launched in November 2011, and at the end of 2011, 2 months, we had over 3,300 some documents. So when I'm talking about the first wave, that's really, I'm going to show you how we pulled in that much content that quickly. We also had 965 downloads within the first 2 months. This is all before we went and talked to faculty. So when we went and talked to faculty, we had an existing IR with content in it. We already had downloads. We had something, basically proof of concept that we could show them. I think that was a big part of our success of getting a lot of faculty involved very quickly. To date, currently, after almost 4 years now, we have almost 60,000 documents, and we've had about 465,000 downloads. Okay, next. Okay, this is a picture of our scanning center. When we launched the repository, we also got a couple of flatbed scanners. We started out with 3 stations of flatbed scanners. And at that time when we first started, we had about a dozen undergraduate students that we hired 7 hours a week to do scanning in our center. And those students were overseen by a couple of civil service staff that we had also repurposed. Due to budget cuts, again, we're currently down to 5 to 7 students per semester, so basically the center is understaffed at this point. The 4th station is that boxy thing there. That's brand new this year. That is a light box, and one of the content collections that we're going to be talking about later utilizes that box, and that's part of what Stacy's going to talk about. This is Chris Kogel. He is a library operations assistant. He's my assistant. I got him about a year and a half into being the repository librarian. Again, this is a repurposed position. We had an open position that was library services assistant. We were able to upgrade it 1 level, and we were able to hire Chris into this position to help me with the IR because it was growing so rapidly. It basically became a much larger than 1-person job. This is a picture of Cliff Harrison. He is one of our repurposed civil service staff. Cliff was in charge of our periodicals department. Now, as you all may be dealing with, as well as what we've been dealing with, we have been canceling print periodicals like crazy. Basically, our print collection is about, I would say, 1/10 of what it used to be about 4 years ago. So essentially, half of Cliff's job went away. And so we repurposed him to oversee our scanning center, to oversee the digitization projects that we have going on. Hillary Clinton does not work for me, but this is a stand-in for my other civil service person, Tina Jenkins. Tina didn't want me to use her picture, so she became Hillary. Tina works in our reserves, and similar to periodicals, our reserves are also down. So Tina's job was also repurposed. She helps oversee the students in the scanning center. Now, since then, Cliff was in library school, and he graduated with his library degree. He got hired to oversee the digitization center at Purdue University, which is fantastic. He basically, with this experience, he was able, and his degree, he was able to jump up into a paraprofessional position. We're very happy for him. We were not able to fill his position, so now Tina is overseeing the scanning center all day long. So it's now Chris and Tina and myself. Okay, so first wave, adding content quickly. As I mentioned, there's 4 areas we pull from. The first area is existing digital content. And one of the big things we had were theses. Starting in 2008, so this is about 3 years before I came on board, there was a distance education class that needed to get access to our master's theses in our collection. Prior to this, normally what we would do is we would copy out that thesis, mail it to the distance education student, but this time we had an entire class that needed access to a lot of these different theses. So the decision was made that we would buy a scanner, put it in our cataloging department, we'll just scan these theses, and then we'll add the catalog records to our catalog, and it will link to the full text of the thesis on our server. So that's how this got started. Well, once we started doing that, we thought, well, we'll just do that from this point on. So from 2008 onward, every thesis deposited in our library was scanned, digitized, and put into our catalogs. So when I came on board as the librarian for the IR, I'm looking at this collection of 700 theses, already digital content, and I wanted to grab this and put it into the repository. And the interesting thing about it, you can go ahead and put it. So this is a screenshot of one of the catalog records. We had a discussion with the library faculty about this, and I remember that our head of cataloging is John Whistler, and John's just a superlative cataloger, and he was like, well, you know, these are in our catalog, they're in the Illinois Share catalog, they're in WorldCat. Anyone around the world can find them. Why bother putting them into the repository? And I said, well, you would be surprised, people will get access to them that normally wouldn't. The next several things you're going to see are graphs and charts that relate to this content. So starting in 2011, we batch uploaded that 700 theses into our repository. At the end of 2011, they made up about 21% of the content in our repository, but they accounted for almost 70% of our downloads. So from the very beginning, we could see our master's theses were exceptionally popular content coming out of our repository. In 2012, there you go. Now in 2012, we are adding more and more content. And every year we add about roughly 100, 120 new theses that are being digitized. Very slowly, we were doing a retrospective digitization of the prior to 2008 theses. So in 2012, the thesis as a percentage of the content had dropped to 9%. But as far as downloads, they were accounting for 50% of our downloads in that year. In 2013, they had gone down to about 4% of the content, and they were accounting for 41% of the downloads. And in 2014, they had dropped down to 3% of the content. They were still accounting for 30% of the downloads. So for over 4 years now, our master's theses have been the most popular content in our repository of anything. Now, as I mentioned, we had them accessible through the catalogs, and we had them accessible through the repository. These were actually two different digital digitizations of those master's theses. Go ahead. So what this chart is it compares, for the fiscal year July 2013 to June 2014, the access points of where people were getting access to our full theses, whether they were getting them through the catalog or whether they were getting them through the repository. The gray bars are through the catalog, and the green bars are through the repository. So what you can see is that by adding them to the repository, we increased access to this content significantly. I mean, well over double. Well over double. The next chart will show you unique titles per month. This is again July 2013 to June 2014. Unique titles, what we mean by that is in a given month, one particular thesis could be downloaded 100 times, but it counts once as a unique title. Okay, that's how you read this chart. Again, the gray bars are the catalog access, the green bars are the theses. Now, the interesting thing about unique titles, and we looked at this for 3 years, the first year, the unique titles coming from the catalogs were higher than they were through the repository. And then over the last 2 years, that's kind of changed somewhat. I'm not really sure what that means. Now, why this cut off in June 2014 is because, honestly, the digitization copies in our repository were much better. They were higher quality. We had a cover sheet that we liked that I'm going to show you a screenshot of shortly. So our catalog records now point towards the repository copies. So in other words, we used to be able to compare server to repository. After June 2014, we no longer could do that.
So when we were digitizing, everything was uploaded to our local server, and then we put a second copy in the repository. So we were serving them from 2 different platforms, which is how we can have these stats. And we decided in 2014 that we were just duplicating effort, and we pointed all the catalog records into the IR instead of running 2 separate copies at that point.
So since the repository, the theses are the most popular content we have, getting back to our theme of It Takes a Library, this is a picture of Ellen Corrigan. She is our cataloging and metadata librarian. She is the person who actually uploads theses to our repository now because we wanted that much higher level of metadata for this very important content. She's been doing it, and she's also been involved with this process. This is the thesis deposit, basically what the student signs off on. This is this first one here is the original deposit reproduction certificate. You probably can't read it, but essentially it just says you give the library permission to loan this to a reputable institution, and that's all it says. In 2008, when we first started digitizing, that form didn't change. It didn't change until I came on board with the repository, and we started seeing downloads, much more downloads. These things were much more visible. We changed it, and Ellen was responsible for this. We went to a much more detailed form of basically spelling out to the student, here's your rights, here's what we're going to do with this content, etc. In the last year and a half, this form changed again, so now it's split into 2 forms. One is the reproduction form that explains what happens with your thesis when you deposit it. The other is an embargo form. The embargo form was, what was just up there, is in place because what we had was 8 chemistry faculty came to us and said, you have 2 theses that are up in your repository. I'm working on getting a grant based on this project. You can't have this up there because I don't want the grantors to see this work yet. So he went to John, our cataloger, and John said, oh yeah, sure, I'll take it out of the catalog. And then he came to me in the repository, and I said, no, I won't take that down because you're not the owner of the intellectual property, the student is. So if the student asks me to do this, I can do this. Unfortunately, both students had gone back to India. So then we now had this quandary. Now he was able to get in touch with the students, we were able to get it embargoed, it was fine. But out of that whole situation, we talked with the graduate school, we talked with a couple of different departments, we came up with this new form. This is our current embargo form. A thesis can be embargoed, it has to be for one of three reasons. They either have to be working on a publication, or they think they're going to get a patent from it, or they're working on a grant. It has to be one of those three. You can't just be like, I just don't want it out there. Also, they can request it for 1 year. After that year, they can make a second request for another year. So that's our embargo policy. It's a maximum of 2 years. You can't ask for 2 years right off the bat. You have to ask for it 1 year at a time. That's the way it is. And this is true for every single master's thesis on our campus. We don't have any exceptions currently for creative writing or for history or for anything like that. Okay, next one. This is that screenshot I was talking about the cover sheet to our master's theses. Now what we did with this, and this was an innovation that we came up with, and we worked with Digital Commons to do this, that sentence at the very bottom says this research is a product of this program in this school. Essentially, the blue things there that say technology and find out more, they link back, in this case, to the School of Technology's graduate program website. So every month, hundreds or thousands of these theses get downloaded. All these cover sheets are going out, linking back to the graduate programs to those departments. And so this is a way that we thought we would try to raise some awareness of our graduate programs. And the great thing about it is our technology master's theses are the most highly downloaded theses we have. What I can tell you is when we first started doing this, which was 3 years ago, their applications to their graduate school jumped by hundreds in the next 2 years. Okay, I don't know hard evidence that that's related to this. Is it causation, correlation? You know, it's hard to tell. But this can't hurt. So this is one of the reasons why we want to point all the cataloging records to the thesis copies in the repositories because of this.
And that is an automatically generated sheet. We don't have to do anything to create that. Digital Commons does that all automatically based on the metadata that's entered in when the item is uploaded. The other great thing about these cover sheets is they are very carefully formatted to exactly match what Google Scholar's crawler looks for. So these things are indexed immediately within Google Scholar and everything lays out perfect to where they sort very high into the search results.
So there's two other areas of existing digital content we had. One is media collections. We had a campus photographer who had on her hard drive images from commencement ceremonies, from different award ceremonies on campus going back many, many years. So in 2011, we were able to start grabbing that stuff off of her hard server to get it into the repository. Now the great thing for her is that, for one thing, it's up on the repository so it's not potentially lost in case something happens to her computer. Secondly, she has a place where she can point people to now. Essentially, it was saying people call her and they say, oh, you took pictures of this award ceremony, where's my picture at? And she points them to the key. And the third area was we had gotten a grant from the Illinois Digital Archives to digitize the first 10 years of the Warbler, which is our yearbook for campus. This was an existing digital collection that we were able to pull that in, and then using the scanning center, we scanned the other Warblers and we put them into the Keep as well. So now we have the entire run of the yearbook in our repository. So that's the three areas of existing digital content that I pulled in right away to get content into the repository.
And the nice thing is with the new yearbooks, we've been able to get digital copy from the students directly so we don't have to scan the things anymore. So networking with your campus publication departments is a very nice thing to save you from having to cut a bunch of yearbooks apart and scan them every year.
Okay, so the next area, go ahead. Obsolete platforms. Stacy was heavily involved in this, so she's going to talk about this slide.
So I don't actually recall what year it was, but one of our vice president, or what is Jeff? He's the
Vice President of Academic Affairs.
Okay. Vice President of Academic Affairs is heavily involved with the Journal of Collective Bargaining in the Academy, and they were looking for somewhere to host their journal on an open source platform, and this was before most of these things were really up and rolling off the ground. He approached the former head of Library Technology Services, and a deal was struck where the library would host it for them on a custom-built platform. So there was a platform built that ran off of ASP Classic, and the PDFs were uploaded, and everything was indexed through this database system that was running an Access with an ASP Classic front end. Now, support for ASP Classic dropped, I don't even remember how many years ago. It's been at least 15, I think. It's barely supported by the new versions of Server, and we're at this point still a primarily Windows shop for our servers. So just keeping this thing running is a constant headache for me. So the more ASP Classic projects that I can kill and move somewhere else makes me very happy. So when Todd was hired, within hours of finding we had a person, I was frantically scribbling notes on how I can make this his problem. And thankfully, he was able to talk to Dr. Cross and share some of the benefits with him of moving to the Keep as a platform as opposed to our locally hosted platform. And would you like to cover some of the benefits that they got?
Basically, it's really, for one thing, it's a much more stable platform. You can hit the next one, because this is what it looks like now. And their journal is much more visible. They get a lot more downloads. They're getting a lot more submissions to the journal because people are just a lot more aware of it. So that's made them very happy, because initially when we first switched this, their journal was kind of on life support, and now it's doing exceptionally well. And the next obsolete platform.
So another one that we had, and this one goes all the way back to, I want to say 2003, which I think was around the time support for ASP Classic ended. Anyway, we have, of course, in our archives a very large collection of historical photographs, and there was several people in archives that were assigned to scan these images in. Metadata again went into a big Access database that had an ASP Classic front end on it, and this is a picture here of what that looked like. So it was a very simple index by keyword, by they had some broad subject categories they'd come up with, and there was also a name index in there. This is still running at this point because the President's office loves it, and we're having trouble getting them to move on to other ways of accessing the information. But since we had this huge collection of images already digitized and we had the metadata in Access, I was able to dump selected collections out of Access, reformat into the fields that Digital Commons needed, and we could just batch that whole metadata set up into one big load and get several hundred images in very, very quickly.
And so this is what it looks like in the repository, and we've broken it out by different types of images. So the cool thing about it is you can go to the page, you can really browse. You can basically see a lot of these images right up front and pick out the ones you want to use. By the way, everything in our repository is under the Creative Commons license. We apply it automatically, and the license is attribution, no derivatives, non-commercial. So essentially what we're saying is you need to credit us. You can't use it for commercial means unless you ask permission. You also cannot make a derivative work from it unless you ask us permission. That's just basically to protect us on this stuff. Okay, also another area where we pulled in content really quickly was archives content. So one of the things our dean wanted to do with the Scanning Center was he wanted to digitize the faculty and staff governance minutes for all these different committees. So that was a fairly quick process. We just ran it through the document feeder, got it digitized, got it put up, and that's a big part of why we had so much content so quickly. We also were digitizing historical documents. This is a screenshot of our laboratory school yearbooks. Now on Eastern, we had a working school, which was a lab school, which is part of our training teachers. And that was there for, I want to say, roughly about a dozen years. That we graduated students out of this laboratory school. They recently had, a couple years ago, a reunion. So we had digitized all these prior to that reunion, put them up there, and we put this notice of this on their Facebook page. And they were really ecstatic to see these old yearbooks up there and all these old pictures. And the last area of getting content very quickly was a couple places of department outreach. Theater Productions came to us when they first heard we had an IR. They had file cabinets full of photos and programs and stuff from all these different productions they had done over the years. So this was one of our first early big scanning center projects. We got this digitized and put up there, and we run this rotating image through that shows you highlights of different productions. And this is Wesley Whiteside. Is a retired biology professor that has this just fantastic botanical garden outside of town that he's since donated to the university. We started to catalog those plants, and so they came to us and they wanted to create an initial collection in the repository of these different types of plants. Okay. So all of that was the first wave, and that's how we got a whole bunch of content in really quickly. Within about, I would say, a little over a year, we had almost 15,000 documents already. So now we're moving into where do we branch out from there? Well, one of the places we went to was Undergraduate Work. The library has, every year, what's called a Research and Creative Activity Award for student work, where they'll turn in their paper, they'll write an essay about how they use library resources to do this paper, and then it's judged by a panel of faculty, and, whoops, and that's okay, and that's fine, just stay there.
I thought you had stats next, I'm sorry.
And so they win an award. Now that picture that was up there for a moment was one of the papers from 2 years ago. It's been downloaded 7,000 times around the world since then. So undergraduate work can be just as popular as graduate work. And for those of you who use Digital Commons, you're aware of that all the content from Digital Commons around the world are all compiled into various types of repositories, one of which is the Undergraduate Commons. So all undergraduate work ends up into this huge Undergraduate Commons, so it's a worldwide collection. The other thing we're doing is community connections. This is a screenshot of the Little Theater in Sullivan, Illinois. It was started by Guy Sullivan back in the 1940s. Now, Guy Little? In Sullivan, sorry, Guy Little in Sullivan. So it's his name, Little Theater, and it's in Sullivan. Back in the day, during the summers, as some of you who are my age might remember, it used to be reruns all the time. And people who starred in TV during the summers, they would go and they would do regional theater. So this regional theater is fairly famous, actually, and had some very famous people there. So we have this collection of all these photos and programs from the Little Theater. Go ahead for the next one. And this is being developed by David Bell, who is a reference librarian, and he's our liaison librarian to the theater department. So he's building that collection and putting that up into the repository.
Now, we're lucky in that David's already in the library, so we've already got an in, but projects like this, where you've got a faculty member that has a huge collection of digital content amassed, buy them lunch, talk to them, see what you can do, because if they've already got it on their hard drive or on their server, that's a really easy bunch of stuff that you can batch in really quickly, especially if they've already got the metadata keyed in somewhere for you and you can convert it for a batch upload.
This is the Daily Eastern News is our campus newspaper. It's our newspaper of record, which makes us cringe sometimes because it's all done by students, so it's not totally accurate.
But they do win awards. They do
win
too.
awards. But, this week, for example, I'm on the faculty senate, and I was quoted in a newspaper article where they referred me to me as the dean of the libraries. So I got a call from Jeff Cross of BPA, and he congratulated me on being dean of the libraries. But we've been digitizing this and put it up. This year is the 100-year anniversary of the Den, and so we have about 20-some years currently digitized up, and we're working feverishly to get more of that posted.
And this is another example of a collection that we already had digitized back in the late 90s, I think. A deal was struck between student publications and the library where they would drop the digital copy of the paper onto one of our servers, and then we would serve it for them as a PDF, and we had a Google Mini search appliance that indexed that for them for full text searching. Well, unfortunately, after many, many years of reliable service, the Google Mini died in the night, and we didn't replace it. So the Keep has become the platform now that we are serving the Den from. And in addition to that initial batch of material that we already had as born digital, we're now going back and rescanning the older issues.
This is one of the collections too that when we do new collections in the repository, we'll say something on our Facebook page, the Booth Library Facebook page. That collection was the one that got the attention of the Charleston Chamber of Commerce. They liked that, so that's pretty awesome. This collection is moving into a whole new territory. We have a gigantic herbarium collection on campus, just over Urbanger Herbarium Collection, 80,000 specimens. So we've been working to digitize this. We're going to be working on it probably till we retire. This is, we have 16,000 metadata records in the repository right now, and we're tying that into this digitization of these different specimens. Now, the cool thing about this is we cross-tie these in the repository. So for example, you have somebody who writes a thesis, and they're in biology, they write a thesis, and part of it is based on some specimens they collected. We tie those records together, so the specimen record points towards their thesis record in the repository, and vice versa. So that's been kind of a great way to really kind of enhance the whole scholarly collection here. Stacy's been working very much on this, so I'll go ahead with the next picture. There's a couple pictures of Stacy here working with the light box. That's why we got the light box, actually, is to digitize these specimens. And then that's a close-up of the specimen in the light box. You have a little ruler there that shows the true size of the document, and the little, you can't see it, but there's a little color chart also to help you accurately assess the color. So the light box we got partially from library administration came up with some money. We also got it partially from a faculty development grant that we were able to get.
So on the herbarium stuff, if you're looking to get a massive amount of content really quickly, find your botanist, find your mycologist, also known as the mushroom fungus guy, over in your biological sciences department. Take them to lunch and chat them up and see how they're storing their records and if they have anything digitized already. If they've already uploaded to a SciNet platform, and SciNet is a national, if not international, biodiversity information network, you can pull the collection back down in a standardized format in it comes down in a CSV file. You can then manipulate that big flat file to where you can do a batch upload into your repository. If they've already uploaded their images to SciNet, then you can link back through and add several thousand records very quickly, and then start doing some of the linkages Todd was talking about, where you can tie them to the faculty research that cites them, tie them to the theses. I've also done some work with tying archival collections to herbarium collections. We had a relatively well-known landscape painter that was a student at Eastern, and we have some of his letters and other items in our archives. When he was a student at Eastern, he did some work in the botany department, so there were specimens from him in the herbarium collection. So then we can tie together on his collector page in the herbarium the archival content with the herbarium specimens.
Okay, the other type of content is syllabi. Our English department came to us and they said, well, we want to digitize all our syllabi and put them out there because we get constant requests for former students that they want to see. They're applying to graduate school, to a doctorate program somewhere, or for a job perhaps, and they need to see that syllabi of that class they took to get a sense of what they studied, I guess. So the English department contacted me and they said, well, we have boxes and boxes of this, we want to digitize, we want to put it out there. And because it was coming from the department, I perhaps stupidly assumed that the faculty were all on board with this because it was coming from the department. So, so we went ahead and we put this up there. And I did get just a couple faculty members who contacted me who said, why is my syllabi up there? And they apparently weren't at that meeting where this was decided. But these are very popular. They get downloaded a couple hundred times a week. As that little readership map, which comes with digital commons, that shows you where everything has been downloaded to. You can see this is like all over the world. Also, what we started doing with the repository is we have Desire to Learn on our campus. I don't know how many of you might have Desire to Learn on your campuses, but with Desire to Learn, there's what's called a Learning Objects Repository. It costs us $25,000 a year. Our university canceled that because they said we have the key, so we don't need the Learning Objects Repository. So we have now created open educational resource pages for every department in our repository for them to use. Go ahead with this. And that's being spearheaded by Steve Brantley, who is our head of reference. And he's sort of we don't really have an instruction librarian, but he's kind of our unofficial instruction librarian, so he's spearheading that project. Moving into the future, what things do we intend to do? So one thing is we're hoping to host student journals. So we have a lot of student journals on our campus. The vehicle is one of them. We've been in talks with the student editors of the vehicle to get them hosted in our repository. There's a lot of benefits to hosting the repository that we've seen in the example with the JCBA, the previous journal we showed you. So we're going to be working on those. Also, we intend to work on data sets. Data sets are interesting because we talked to the Research and Sponsored Programs department on our campus who said, oh, you know, an institution of our size, our faculty really don't do that much research, so there probably isn't that much data out there. Well, we worked with BPress to do a faculty survey, and the faculty survey produced a lot of data sets, actually, that our sneaky little faculty have all over their computers and hard drives and everything. So we're going to be working on data sets. This screenshot here is not us, it's the university, it's the Digital Commons at UMass Amherst, but it's a data set of translator prefaces, which one of our faculty in English found, well actually we showed it to him, and he was ecstatic to see this because this was a whole new resource that he didn't know anything about. And then he said, well, I have a data set of faculty preface, or of translator prefaces that we will add to our repository. Next one.
And that's, I'll just throw something in here. A lot of what we have been finding with these is in the humanities, and one of the earliest ones that we actually inherited was a index of the Lincoln court cases that are in our regional depository archives. And it was put together on a grant. They had it on this ancient, well, it was brand new at the time, Sun server. Years down the road, it was costing more power to keep this thing running than anyone was willing to pay for, so the library took it in so that it would be able to live on, reformatted it with a new interface, and that became basically our first data set. And then working through preservation with that, we've since converted it into a CSV and put it up in the Keep as an individual data set, as well as documenting all the iterations of the interface that it's gone through. And that was something that the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at UIUC, one of their digital preservation classes, worked on that as a project for us to kind of give us some ideas of how to approach these projects that have gone through several iterations where there's a core data set, but there's all this other baggage with it, how to present that within the depository.
And then the other thing that's a future direction for us is the state of Illinois, I'll say early last year, passed what we call the open access law. And essentially what they said was if you are an institution that gets public money in the state of Illinois, you need to create a task force, and the task force needs to come up with a best means for your campus to present this taxpayer-funded research and make it available in open access. So they left it up to each institution to decide best how to do that. This is a screenshot of our open access policy that our task force drafted. Essentially what our policy says is that this is important content, scholarship on our campus is important to make available to the taxpayers of Illinois. If you're a faculty member on campus, you will do this. You can waive, there's a waiver, you can opt out on a per scholarship, like per article basis, or you can opt out just in general, and so you don't want to participate. So we do give them the opt out. But the cool thing about the policy is it kind of puts the onus somewhat on them. So essentially the default stance is you will put stuff in the repository, or you will have us put stuff in the repository. You need to opt out. Whereas currently the default stance is you normally don't unless we come to you and we ask you to do it. So we expect we're going to be getting more faculty content. Faculty recruitment, and this image I'm using here, which we just moved off of.
Sorry.
That's okay. I really like that image because the guy that's laying in the sand to me represents faculty. And trying to get them out of wet sand and get them to do something can be kind of a challenge. I'm going to talk about the different phases of faculty recruitment we've done. So as I mentioned earlier, we did the repository. We had a proof of concept working repository before we talked to anybody. Spring of 2012, we went out and myself and the Dean of Library Services talked to every college, we talked to almost every department, we just did a lot of face-to-face. So when I'm saying what is it, I don't mean what is face-to-face, I mean that was pretty much what was coming to us about the repository. What is it initially? A lot of people were just like, they had no clue what it was. And it was really important to do that for a couple of reasons. One is to really explain what the repository was. The other was to get them used to me, because I was brand new to campus, people didn't really know who I was yet. So the face-to-face was a very important first part of this. Having them something that was live, that was already in action, was really important too. The next stage, I followed that up in the following fall. So they saw me in person in the spring. They came back from summer break and they saw me in the fall. And then in the fall, what I did was I sent out this is a trifold pamphlet, front and back. And this was sent to every faculty member during Open Access Week in October that fall. It's pretty detailed. It's still a lot of what is a repository because it was still new. And we also included some great quotes from some of our early adapter faculty who were saying how great this is and how much it's helped them. So that was our second stage. About a year later in the fall, I produced this report. This is a booklet actually that we published called the Keep It To. And this booklet is pretty detailed. It has a lot of statistics in it. It also highlights how we have promoted student work, how we promoted faculty work. This booklet was given to our faculty senate. It was given to our library advisory board. It was presented at our council of deans. Our provost actually took it and presented it to our board of trustees. So it went really all the way up because it was people just really liked it and they liked what the Keep was doing. This is just a screenshot from one of the pages within that report where we were essentially highlighting average repository growth the first 2 years and how our growth was higher than average, and lots of rah-rah. So for the last 3 years, every summer we have a new faculty orientation. I go and give a presentation to them. At that time, those of you who have Digital Commons, you may or may not also have Selected Works. That's a little add-on that you can pay for. Selected Works allows each individual faculty member to have their own page, essentially, that highlights their research. So when I talk at faculty orientation, I really highlight Selected Works. And I say, you're a new faculty coming into EIU, you get this page, we help you set it up. This is a way for you to promote your scholarship. The other thing I do, and this screenshot is not what the faculty member sees, but it gives you the sense of the information I send them. In Digital Commons, you get the readership map, and that's a daily thing that shows you downloads and where they're happening. I put that up in a browser on my desktop, and I just let it run. And then throughout the day, I'll go back and I'll look at it, I'll page back through it and see what's been downloaded. Whenever it's a faculty paper, what I do is I zoom in on the map, and then I get a Google map, and I zoom in on the Google map, and then I highlight on the Google map college, university, library, school. And I try to determine if this item was downloaded to a campus somewhere, or to a school somewhere, or to a library. And if it was, I send the faculty member this little email blurb. So this is an example of it. Dr. Ames, this paper was downloaded to someone at Cairo University in Giza, Egypt. Faculty members love this. They just absolutely love this. And the cool thing about it is when they get these emails, what I've seen them do is they will put it up on their social media. So you'll see it showing up on Twitter, you'll see it showing up on Facebook, which is a great way to get their fellow faculty interested because they start seeing this.
Sometimes it gets competitive,
Yes.
which is also helpful.
That's also helpful. As I mentioned, we took part, we were a pilot for Berkeley Electronic Press, the people who produce Digital Commons. We did a faculty digital needs survey with them as a pilot. We got 83% of our departments on campus had some faculty members taking the survey. We got 125 faculty to take the survey. Myself and Steve Brantley, our head of reference, are going to be doing a DPress webinar in December. I think those are open to anybody, where we're going to talk about this survey and the results we got from it. But we learned a lot of things from that survey too. And then the last thing is, this is what I call a success and service report. We did a pilot of this last spring. It's essentially two parts. The first part of the report is this screenshot here. Is sort of highlighting what this department is doing in the repository, where they're getting downloads. I do a little screenshot of the readership map and point out where the different papers should be downloaded to. It's all very much, here's all your successes in the repository. The second part of the report is the service where we say, and here are the things where we can still do for you. So in the case of the Department of English, the second page said, oh, you have 3 student journals and we could host those. And you have some faculty members who aren't currently participating that actually already have open access articles. We could pull those in really easily. So it's sort of it's a 1-2. They get real excited about the success part, and then they look at the service part and they're like, oh yeah, we could do this stuff. So next one. This is Karen Whistler. She's a reference librarian and she's our liaison to the Department of English. I produced this report, I gave it to her, she delivered it to that department. So the reports are going through our liaisons, and our liaisons we're developing into what we call scholarly communication coaches. So they are they're scholarly communication support for their departments, and we're developing that program out. So they got real excited about the report. They came back, we got 3 or 4 new faculty participating from this, and we got the vehicle contacted us and they said, yeah, we want to be hosted in the repository, so this worked out really well. Okay, so we're at the question and answer stage, and I think we've got like 10 minutes maybe left, so are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So way early on, you had said, given a case of 3 reasons to be able to embargo, and it went by fast and I didn't get all 3.
Okay, either they're working on a publication, or a patent, or they're working on a grant.
And did you get any pushback from anybody on that? I mean, I think they're fabulous. I think they're very reasonable reasons. I just am wondering if you got any pushback on them.
No, not really, because most of the time the faculty, if the faculty member really does want an embargo, it's for one of those reasons. So we didn't get any pushback about the reasons. We got a little bit of pushback about the time, you know. We got some faculty who were like, well, what if it needs to go beyond 3 years? And essentially we pushed back on that, and we said, well, we don't think it needs to. So we point out, in this discussion, we kept pointing out how much this content's being downloaded and how important it is to our institution that it gets out there. And keep in mind, we're in a position where we've lost 2,000 students. So I always hit that point hard. If we need to get this content out there, people know we're here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to hug you for telling that other faculty person that no, this is not your intellectual property. You don't get to do that. Just make that decision for them.
Yeah. Well, it was a little awkward for me because John just, he hadn't thought about it. He just automatically took the catalog record down. So the faculty member was sort of told yes, and then they got to me, and then so it was a little awkward for me to say actually no. That's the reality of it. It's not their intellectual property. Now, you might have noticed on that form, the student or the advisor can request an embargo. It could be one or the other. Now, if there's a conflict, the student wins. But essentially, the reason why we set that up is if we have a situation like this where the student is, leaving and they don't have time to do this, but the faculty member is still on campus, the faculty member can still sign it. So that's what we did that. Yes, ma'am.
I guess, policy for open access on campus, is there any way that you can track compliance to that? Do you know how many people are actually publishing but not depositing? Is there any sort of, are there repercussions if they don't deposit and haven't asked for a waiver?
Yeah, well, that's going to be via an internal governing policy which is being developed in the provost's office. But I can tell you what I do is, are you guys all aware of ResearchGate? Okay. I sign on the ResearchGate and I follow every faculty member that is in EIU in ResearchGate because I can then see when they're depositing. And so essentially I'm stalking them by using ResearchGate. And I also do that with academia.edu. But I get all these notices of saying, oh, Dr. Menza deposited this paper. Now I know it exists. Now I know it's there. That's how I'm tracking them. So that's what I'm doing. Now, what the policy that's going to be coming from the provost's office, knowing the provost, I think it's going to be pretty clear to say that faculty member, this is your responsibility. You need to get this content to Todd. Or you need to email Todd and say, I am waiving putting this into the repository. Yes, sir.
Just wondering if you've got any pushback about mandating a particular flavor in Creative Commons. If you've had anyone deposit that wants something more or less restrictive, if they want all rights reserved.
Mm-hmm. No, not really pushback. The Creative Commons license we have, my understanding is it is one of the more restrictive ones. It's the, the attribution, non-commercial, non-derivatives. So the only, but the way we have it set up, it's an automatic license, but we can change it. That's essentially how we have it set up, and that's how we describe it to our students and our faculty. If you want a different license, or you just don't want a license on at all, you just tell us, and we change it. And the only times that they've changed it has been to have a less restrictive license. So we've never had anybody that wants it more restrictive. Yes, sir.
I have a question about how the master's theses are getting into the IR in terms of intellectual property importance. Does the open access policy compel it, or is this, or the graduation requirements compel?
The graduation requirements is part of our, the graduation manual essentially says part of your education here, learning being funded by the state of Illinois, although we add such as it is, because our funding keeps dropping, that it's part of the requirement that they're going to do this. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a scanning question. Some of your historical documents, are you scanning to archival standards in terms of DPI and TIFFs, or are you and then converting to PDFs? Okay.
Yeah, we have an internal imaging handbook that's based off of the Illinois State Library developed standards. And then Ellen Corrigan also works closely with the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries in Illinois. Shoot, what's the whole title of the thing she's on?
Their digitization.
Digital creation, anyway, the scanning people.
Yeah.
Created content, I think that's it. Anyway, she's very in tune with the standards that they're going to, so we have a manual that we follow for that. If it's primarily an image, then it gets saved as a TIFF. If it's more text heavy, then it gets saved as a PDF-A.
Yes, ma'am.
We had a request once, it wasn't in a scholarly repository, it was actually on the web, where, and I'm curious if you've had this, where a student asked for their paper to be taken down because he didn't know about it.
No.
And how would you handle it?
Well, we normally, our policy is if you get a request to take down, you take down. That's essentially what that's kind of why we err on the side of, let's put everything up, because if somebody complains, we'll take it down. But no, I have not seen that. The only thing I've seen, I don't know if this is really related to that or not, was I found that a company took all of our digitized warblers and were selling them. And so I came across this, and so I turned that over to our legal counsel, who then talked to them. But that's where the Creative Commons license that we have actually really helped, because we already had that license on there saying you cannot use this for commercial means unless you ask us permission, and they had it. So, yes, sir.
Did you say you were doing retrospective digital conversion of theses?
Yeah.
But how are you handling the intellectual property issues there?
We're going ahead and we're putting it up. If the student contacts us, we will take it down.
And there was a reproduction sign-off on there that can be rather broadly interpreted. Because they did sign off on having it distributed to other libraries. It depends on how you interpret the word distribution.
But again, if it's their property, so if they were to ask us, take it down, we would do that. Interestingly, though, that hasn't happened. What has happened is students have contacted us and they said, oh, my thesis is up there. I have a much better digital copy that I would rather you use.
Yeah.
And they'll get that to us, and that's been fantastic. The flip side of that is, recently we've had some students who have brought us digital copies of their thesis where they had updated the thesis since it was deposited and changed things, and then we have to say, no, we can't take that. It's not the thesis of record, so we can't take it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
The URLs that link back in the cover pages, that's really cool. I think that's a really, really great idea. Are you guys doing any authoritative index that those links will stay active in the future if the campus changes servers or something? Or, basically, are they static, or are they going to somehow point to a DOI that points to that page and shares?
We have to update them, yeah. But what we do is regularly we basically go through and check, and then we'll send those new links to BPress and say we need to update these.
Sure.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was looking at your site, and I was wondering if you had one interface that catches all of this, or you break down archives versus publications?
It's all broken down. We follow the same structure as what the university's website follows. So it's all broken down by academic areas. So at the very front page, you've got colleges, departments, blah, blah, blah. And if you click on that, then it's all the different departments, which will include university archives and Booth Library as well. But on the main page, we have the bigger, broader areas of student work is a broad area. Faculty research goes into our selected works collection. And then we also have conferences, events, and exhibits. And I forget what the fifth one is. I don't remember. But anyway, yeah, there's kind of these big, broad areas. But then if you really want to see what each department's doing, you get into that top link, and it'll get you there. Okay. Well, this was our first time here. This was really fun. So thanks for having us.